Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about bridging principles. So the bridging principles are a little bit different than the other principles in the book in that bridging principles seek to essentially describe a domain of options that can occur in bridging. So they don't really speak about goals, they speak essentially about the domain of things that you can do. So if we consider that bridging, I brought a prop out today, it's not attached, so I'll have to be careful with that, I can't put too much force into it, but the idea being that I want to get to the nervous center, the center of balance of the attacker, and that's my primary goal. Most of, if I'm going to choke, I'm going for the neck, go for a knockout, probably the head, throw them, I need to access the body in some way. The arm is usually going to present a challenge for me that I have to then pass, and so if I don't manage the bridge and I simply go in, there's the distinct possibility that something happens on my way in that stops me. So at the very least, I need to make sure that the arm is managed so that I can get to the body. So and to do that, there'll be this bridge between my torso, my center of gravity, and theirs. So in bridging, we've identified really 8 primary domains of possibility. And only 3 of those 8 really represent control. The others are essentially forms of repositioning. So when we say create, what we're saying is, I want to somehow create a connection with their bridge, one or both. Let's assume for now we're just talking about one arm at a time. There'll be some exceptions, I'll bring those up in a moment. We want to create a bridge so that we can then implement some of the other possibilities. So the poems often say in Chinese, they say, if there is no bridge, create one. And so I can do that either by virtue of him attacking me and I block, or I attack and he blocks, or I feint so that I can pull his attention and potentially his weapon or his shield out of position. So I may feint and then attack elsewhere. So those are methods of creating a bridge, either offensive, defensive, or through mental manipulation like feinting. So that's creating. Disengage is for when we're engaged, but then I want to get my arm clear of that. He might want to stick to this arm, so I may have to do something to keep his arm in position so that this arm can disengage. If I simply retreat, he's probably going to fill that void. So it's rare that we'll do a disengage all by itself without some assistance from the other arm, but sometimes we will. So if, for instance, if I'm here and I want to get around and strike that side of the head, I may have to manage this arm so that I can do that. Or if I want to come underneath to hit low, I may do that. So disengage is essentially the polar opposite of create. And so as you can, hopefully it's very clear that creating this bridge doesn't mean I moved the person. Creating the bridge just means there's now a point of contact. And so the same occurs for disengage. I'm just removing that point of contact. There is no control of the other person really assumed in there. So we're trying to be real careful because one of the reasons for identifying these is to better understand our training and better understand what we're seeing in other arts. So when we get to transfer, one of the more complex bridging principles, it'll probably make more sense as to why we're being super clear about what we're talking about. So again, create, disengage, no control, but they give us the option. Create starts to give us the other options because now we have a point of contact. Detain and move. So detain essentially is something like kakeuke, grabbing, or a lapsao in Wing Chun, grabbing. Anytime you're grabbing and holding, or you're pushing so that they can't move in that direction. You may not be holding them completely, but you're holding them from going in a direction that would be a problem for you. So earlier in my example, I created a bridge and then I wanted to disengage so I could strike low. So what I do is I actually detain in an upward direction so that that arm can't come down and drop and block me while I'm under here. If I just go like this, he may drop his elbow like we do in our Sanshin and dropping elbow style of blocking motions. So I would detain him upwards and strike underneath. So that's detain. It can be a full grab, a partial grab, a press or check, or that kind of thing. So that's detain. Move would be, now move is similar but different. Move actually says, rather than saying, I'm not going to let you go somewhere, it says, you're going where I want you to go. So essentially, every blocking motion is typically the combination of create and then move. Create and then move out of the way. Create and then move so that I'm safe. Many other things are move. You just want to manipulate the body, you want to pivot the person, turn them, float them. There's so many reasons to move a bridge. Probably really too many to create full set of examples. But it certainly can be a form of control. Usually move is how you're moving their structure or breaking their balance, and that's the type of thing. Stick is unique. Now a lot of people will confuse stick and move, and so we gave the options to discuss these very separately. We're giving, so if you think in kind of a yin-yang approach, move is a much more aggressive, whereas stick is completely passive. In this parlance, stick means to, once you've created a connection where that limb moves, you follow it where it's moving without guiding it in any particular direction. So there's no move in stick the way we describe it. Very low use because of its passive nature. Almost everything else that we do you could describe as largely aggressive, and with aggression being one of the main principles. And aggression, again, usually speaks to just the distance and time between the two components of self-defense, whether you defend yourself and control the attacker. The most aggressive versions have those at the same time, the least stagger them. So the further the distance between your self-defense, your defense, and your counter-control, the less aggressive you are in our definitions. So again, stick is passive. There's not a whole lot of examples for that. If the arm goes out and you've created a bridge and you've moved it offline, but then as they retract, if you follow that punch back in, that would probably be a good example of a stick maneuver. Cross means to reposition yourself along the length of the weapon that you're working with, or the bridge. So if the punch comes in and I want to, if I can't see or I'm moving very quickly, I know the anatomy of the human body. I know that on the other end, above this bridge, is a neck and a clavicle, a throat. I know that below this bridge is an armpit and some ribs. So I know where there are some targets. So I don't always have to look. So when I block and contact, I can just go directly to where there's a target and know that all the time. So that's what cross is. Cross means to engage with the limb and move along its length. It's the same way you would cross a bridge from one bank to the other side of the river. Break often requires two hands. It is potentially possible if you're talking about things like defanging the snake. If you happen to hit very hard on the elbow at the right time, when they have the right energy, you might be able to break or hyperextend their elbow. It is possible, but typically break requires two limbs to effect correctly. So break is an option. It really means, usually tearing at the shoulder or elbow, sometimes at the shoulder, could potentially be the wrist or the fingers, those kinds of things. Break could be these kinds of maneuvers. Could again be this kind of inward hammer, could be a number of things, could often be both hands. Transfer is a bit more complex. So people talk about primary hand, secondary hand. I used to talk about this a bit differently than I do now. Even an older video that I put up about principles of blocking didn't have the clearest language, honestly. So you'll hear people say block parry, parry pass, block check control, all of these terms. And again, I put this in the book around page 152 in the book. Transfer is a complex maneuver, but it's essentially exchanging. The concept is simple. The implementation gets a little weird because people use different terms that aren't exactly clear. So if I've engaged with this hand, proper hand, let's say this is the attacker's right hand, I'm using my left hand, I'm going to set up a proper hand engagement in order to be able to flank. I'm going to engage with my left hand, proper hand, and my goal is to be over here. Well, how do I navigate that without, if I disengage, that arm may swing around and hit me while I'm trying to maneuver this hand into play. So what we do is we create a bridge, we move the bridge to make sure we don't get hit, we create a secondary bridge, then we disengage the first bridge. So again, with the first hand, we create, then move, that's the blocking maneuver. We create a connection with the secondary hand, and then we disengage the first hand. So this is exchange or transfer of hands for purposes of repositioning. So that's what transfer is. I hope this helps. I can dive into more detail on any of these and give more examples, but I think it's critical to keep in mind this is usually about managing the hands, because the hands become the barrier, multi-step barrier, as we discussed in the book in the section on 3 sections and 3 gates. The barrier between me and my attacker. Of the 8 principles that are used to describe nearly every activity with the arms, only 3 of them are clearly control maneuvers. The remainder are repositioning. The control maneuvers are detain, to disallow the attacker from moving where they want to, or where they might move in a way that causes us trouble. Move would be to push them to a place where it's advantageous for us. And then break, of course, being a way of causing damage and potentially structural problems for the attacker. So anyhow, I hope this helps. Let me know your thoughts and questions, and I'll follow up with other discussions. Thanks, bye.